James Cooper was once a legendary Navy SEAL. For 15 years, he undertook missions most people only dared to hear about on the news, rescuing hostages in war zones, destroying enemy weapon stockpiles, and quietly withdrawing under a hail of bullets. But now, James lives in silence. He has chosen a simple life, far removed from glory and violence. James, you're not a SEAL anymore. Let the past rest. Those are the words he tells himself every morning as he stands before the mirror in his small apartment. Brooksville, the town where he lives, is a quiet corner of America where time seems to slow down. James works at the local bank as a maintenance worker. He doesn't seek attention, nor does he want anyone to know about his past achievements. But this also means most people underestimate him. A regular customer, dressed in an expensive suit, once pointed at him and sneered, "A veteran mopping floors? That's rough, buddy." James just smiled. He was used to such comments. But his cold blue eyes flickered for a moment, like the gaze of someone who has faced death and feels no fear. Even so, he doesn't blame them. They don't know. No one in this small town knows that the man they dismiss once fought to protect their freedom, sometimes at the cost of blood and tears. But this peaceful life is about to be disrupted. James doesn't know that an incident is about to happen, forcing him to awaken the man he once was. A soldier, a warrior, and above all, a protector. What will happen when the past he has tried to bury comes knocking at his door once again? It was a morning like any other at Brooksville Bank. The clock on the wall ticked steadily, and sunlight streamed through the glass windows, casting long streaks of light across the spotless tiled floor, cleaned by James just the day before. James Cooper, dressed in a gray work uniform and worn-out shoes, was perched on a ladder fixing the electrical system on the ceiling. The faint sound of his steps echoed softly, but no one paid attention. He was used to this. Here, he was invisible. At the teller counter, a young woman with short red hair, Claire Thompson, was assisting a customer. As a new bank employee, she was enthusiastic but occasionally clumsy. "I'm sorry for the delay, sir," Claire said apologetically, her voice flustered as she fumbled and dropped a receipt. The customer, a middle-aged man in an expensive suit, frowned, clearly annoyed. "You should be more focused. My time is valuable, you know?" From his spot on the ladder, James glanced down briefly, sensing the irritation in the man's tone, but he quickly returned to his task. In another corner of the bank, an elderly couple sat waiting for their turn. The elderly woman offered James a gentle smile when their eyes met. James gave her a small nod in return, but said nothing. Moments later, Eddie Larson, the head teller, stepped out of his office. Eddie was a tall, lanky man with meticulously combed hair. He always tried to maintain a polished appearance, though his attitude was far from pleasant. "Hey, Cooper," Eddie called out loudly, his tone mocking. "If this wiring breaks again, maybe you should reconsider your skill set. Don't forget, we don't pay for sloppy work around here." A few staff members chuckled quietly at Eddie's remark. James responded with a faint, indifferent smile, saying nothing. "Bet fixing wires is a lot easier than the battlefield, huh, SEAL?" Eddie added, his voice laced with sarcasm. James paused briefly, then resumed tightening a screw. He didn't let comments like these bother him, even though they always stirred memories he was trying to bury. Outside, a car horn blared from the main road. Inside, everything remained calm. People continued their tasks, blissfully unaware that this quiet atmosphere was about to be shattered. The calm morning shattered with a thunderous crash from the bank's front doors. Bang! The glass doors flew open, and 4 men stormed in, each wielding an automatic rifle. "Everyone on the ground! Now!" one of them barked, his voice sharp and commanding, freezing everyone in their tracks. The apparent leader, dressed in a black jacket and a ski mask, swung his weapon toward the crowd. His shout echoed through the room, obliterating any sense of peace. Employees and customers dropped to the floor, trembling, too scared to breathe loudly. An elderly woman whimpered softly as she moved too quickly, but no one dared to help. James was still on the ladder, leaning over the wiring. The sudden commotion froze him mid-movement, his hands hovering above the tangle of cables. His sharp eyes flicked downward, quickly assessing the situation. A coordinated group of robbers, he noted. The leader gestured to his crew. A tall man with a shotgun locked the doors and pulled down the window blinds. 2 others began moving through the room, collecting phones and communication devices. "All phones up here," one of them yelled, kicking a middle-aged man in the leg as he tried to hide his phone. Eddie, who always carried an air of smug superiority, was now shaking like a leaf. As one of the robbers approached the counter, Eddie stammered, "Don't shoot, I'll cooperate." The robber smirked menacingly. "Good. Then open the vault right now. If you don't," he tilted his weapon, pointing it at Claire, who was trembling beside Eddie, "she'll be the first." James quietly stepped down from the ladder, every movement slow and deliberate. No one, not even the robbers, paid him any attention. His eyes scanned the room quickly, memorizing every detail, where the robbers stood, their weapons, and most importantly, the escape routes. The leader, his voice dripping with authority, shouted, "Hurry up! I don't have all day!" Eddie, his hands slick with sweat, nervously keyed in the vault code. Meanwhile, James edged toward the back supply room. He understood one critical thing. The robbers didn't see him as a threat. A middle-aged man in a worn-out uniform hardly drew suspicion, but he knew time wasn't on his side. A plan. "I need a plan," James thought, his mind whirring like a finely tuned machine. The peaceful morning was shattered by the sound of the bank door crashing open. Thud. The glass door slammed open, and 4 men stormed in, each armed with an automatic rifle. "Everyone on the ground! Now!" barked one of them, his voice sharp and commanding, freezing everyone in their tracks. The apparent leader, dressed in a black jacket and ski mask, swung his weapon toward the crowd. His shout echoed through the room, obliterating any sense of calm. Employees and customers dropped to the floor, trembling, too scared to even breathe loudly. An elderly woman whimpered softly as she moved too quickly, but no one dared to help. James stood quietly near the maintenance room door, his steps calculated and deliberate. No one, not even the robbers, noticed his steady movements. His heartbeat remained calm. Training from his years as a Navy SEAL allowed him to remain composed even in the face of danger. He opened the door to the maintenance room and gently closed it behind him, ensuring it didn't make a sound. Inside, the small, cluttered space was dimly lit by a flickering neon light. James scanned the room, looking for anything that could serve as a weapon. "Screwdriver? Electrical cables. There we go," he muttered under his breath, quickly stuffing the items into his tool bag. He picked up a long metal rod, part of a broken machine, and tested its sturdiness. Not perfect, but it would suffice as an improvised baton. Wrapping the electrical cable tightly around his hand, like a makeshift combat rope, he crouched and peeked through the door crack. Out in the main hall, the leader of the group was yelling, "Hurry up! Open the vault now!" Eddie fumbled nervously with the keypad, sweat streaming down his face. Another robber, short but with an intimidating presence, stood watch over the hostages. His sharp eyes darted between them, occasionally barking threats to keep them subdued. The remaining 2 robbers stood near the entrance and windows, vigilantly scanning the surroundings as if expecting the police to arrive at any moment. James quickly analyzed the scene. They're heavily armed, but disorganized. The leader's the biggest threat. I need to disrupt their control before making a move. James moved to the bank's electrical control panel, knowing exactly where it was from his daily duties. His hands worked swiftly, removing the cover and carefully flipping a few switches. Part of the main lobby lights went out, casting shadows near the teller counters. "What the hell is going on?" one of the robbers shouted, looking around in alarm. James didn't stop. He disabled the bank's security camera system next, adding to their confusion. "I told you not to try anything," the leader roared, waving his gun threateningly at the hostages. But James had already slipped out of the maintenance room. Using the dim lighting to his advantage, he moved stealthily, staying low and using furniture for cover. James approached the robber near the teller counter first. Gripping the metal rod tightly, he controlled his breathing to stay focused. Waiting for the right moment, he struck swiftly when the robber turned his back, delivering a precise blow to the back of his head. The man collapsed silently. Dragging the unconscious robber into a concealed spot, James quickly confiscated his weapon and extra ammunition. Next was the man watching the hostages. He was deep in conversation with the leader, his body tense. James moved around the area, using the shadows to stay hidden. With the electrical cable wrapped tightly around his hand, James suddenly appeared behind the robber. A sharp strike to the neck rendered the man momentarily stunned, and before he could react, James had him bound tightly with the cable. The hostages watched in stunned silence, some barely daring to believe their eyes. The leader sensed something was wrong. "What the hell's going on here?" he growled, his eyes darting around the room. James stepped out of the shadows, the confiscated weapon aimed directly at the leader. "Drop the gun! Now!" The leader sneered, gripping his rifle tighter. "Who the hell are you? Some maintenance guy? Think you can play hero?" James's voice remained calm but firm. "I'm the last person you want to mess with. Drop the weapon, and no one has to die." The tension in the room was palpable. The leader hesitated, his mind racing, but before he could act, James fired a warning shot into the wall. The crack of the gunshot echoed, making the leader flinch. Finally, he threw his weapon to the ground. When the police arrived, they found James standing amidst the subdued robbers, the hostages safe and unharmed. Relief swept through the room. Some hostages cried tears of gratitude, while others stared at James in awe. "Just a maintenance guy?" someone murmured in disbelief. James said nothing, walking back toward the maintenance room as if nothing had happened. James stood in the shadowed corner of the bank, watching the police escort the captured robbers into the patrol cars. Though the ordeal was over, all eyes remained fixed on him, filled with admiration and respect. One of the bank employees, Sarah, who had once looked down on James, approached him with tearful eyes. "You truly saved our lives. I'm so sorry for how I've treated you before." Her voice broke with emotion. James gave a faint smile and a small nod. "I just did what needed to be done," he replied, then turned and walked away, as if it were nothing extraordinary. In the days that followed, James's story spread quickly through the town. His name appeared in local newspapers, accompanied by praises from the community. Colleagues who had once dismissed him now avoided meeting his gaze, overwhelmed by guilt and awe. At a community gathering, the mayor presented James with a Medal of Honor, but he humbly declined any fanfare. "Remember," he said, his voice steady yet modest, "each of us has the power to do what's right, if we have the courage." From that day on, James was no longer just the maintenance guy in everyone's eyes. He became a symbol of bravery and righteousness, a reminder that sometimes the greatest heroes come from the most unassuming places. A few weeks after the bank incident, James decided to leave the small town, leaving behind a heartfelt letter for the community. "Thank you for giving me a place to find peace. But I've realized there are still others out there who need help more than I do." He returned to a life of purpose, dedicating himself as a volunteer aiding struggling veterans. He helped them overcome psychological trauma, reintegrate into society, and rediscover meaning in their lives. The story closes with an image of James standing under the warm sunlight, smiling as he watches a young veteran regain confidence in himself. The narration ends with this message: not everyone knows the story of James Cooper, but his actions remind us all of the enduring power of courage, humility, and the will to protect others, values that never fade, whether in or out of uniform.